Josh Pate's going to join us at 7:40.
Yes, he is.
Got the college football playoff rankings to react to, and that's where we will start. Your Oregon Ducks, to the surprise of everybody, were ranked number 1 in the land.
I was shocked to find that out.
I was too.
Because nobody's given us a chance. Nobody thinks we can win anything, and so to see us number 1, genuinely surprised last night.
We all saw it coming. And the committee basically said, hey, they are very deserving of this. So that wasn't, to me, any shocking development. We joke about that.
No, we knew who the number 1 team in the country was going to be.
The ranking goes as follow. Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, Georgia 3, Miami 4, Texas 5, Penn State 6, Tennessee 7, Indiana and BYU are 8 and 9, Notre Dame, Bama, Boise State. Those are your top 12.
I got a little excited because we did our top 12s on the show yesterday, and I hit the first 5 as they were going down, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, and I was like, hey, look, I'm 5 for 5 so far, and then they flipped Tennessee and Penn State on me, so I ended up being wrong, and then I called you an idiot for thinking Ohio State could be the second-ranked team in the country on the show, and look at that. Ohio State was the second-ranked team in the country.
Yeah, I put Georgia as my number 2, but the idea that Ohio State couldn't be number 2.
Make it make sense.
I thought Reese Davis was interesting to listen to last night. He kept pointing to Georgia struggling, and I'm like, did we just forget that Ohio State barely beat Nebraska at home?
Nebraska had the ball with a chance to win in Columbus.
Like Reese Davis had somehow forgotten that
a week and a half ago. That was not in ancient history. That happened like 12 days ago.
So I had Oregon right, Miami right, Texas right, and then I think I had Bama, Boise State. Everything else was kind of jumbled and mixed around. Largely.
Well, knowing what you have always argued on this show, we should have simply done what you point to, and that is they copy off of the AP poll.
Yes,
and
they do not watch all these games. They're
outside of Georgia and Ohio State, who are 2 and 3 in the AP poll, they flipped them in the college football playoff rankings. That was literally the only difference with the AP poll. And the top 13 teams, or 12, I guess we're going 12 for the playoff. The only difference was Georgia's 2 in the AP, Ohio State's 2 in the college football playoff rankings. You can say Georgia's struggling, that's fine. Ohio State's best win on the year is unquestionably Penn State. By their own logic and ranking these teams, they're telling you that the Texas win was more impressive than the Penn State win for Ohio State. And Georgia also has a win over Clemson under their belt, and I don't understand.
I want to get to Ward Manuel, who's now the talking representative of the committee, and he is also the athletic director at Michigan. On that note, so what we learned yesterday was that the better loss is what differentiates Ohio State, Georgia, that Ohio State lost by 1 at Autzen.
To me, they're the same loss. It was
Georgia
a one-possession game.
I
don't care about point differential. Obviously, if you lose by 30, you lose by 30.
Sure.
They lost by 1 possession. They had a chance to win it at the end, and they could. Those games were identical.
Well,
almost.
But also I want to highlight, and this, it's not easy to do these shows. Okay, so I'm criticizing a little bit. I also want to be honest and fair. We don't nail everything every day on our show.
No.
But having watched the program, I found it interesting that we're kind of debating who had the better loss, and then like highlighting Ohio State beat Penn State at Penn State, and Georgia beat Texas at Texas. Okay. They didn't bring up the fact that Georgia housed Clemson. That was not part of the
Which is still technically a top
conversation.
25. We can feel how we want to feel about Clemson, but by their own metric, Clemson is a top 25 team in the country.
They won by like 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, it was 34-3, I believe, was the final.
That didn't seem to matter to Ward Manuel and the committee, and it wasn't really brought up by Reese Davis. Here was Ward Manuel on the difference between Ohio State and Georgia.
They both had great wins in terms of on the road, Ohio State against Penn State this week, Georgia at Texas. But what we felt is in terms of the losses they had, Ohio State lost to number 1 Oregon by 1, and Georgia lost at Alabama, who's ranked number 11. And so that was really the difference. I mean, we're splitting hairs in terms of looking at 2 great teams.
So, yeah, I just found it odd. It wasn't even like, and maybe I'm sure it was, but like it wasn't actually a conversation talking point that Georgia just blew the doors off of Clemson to start the season.
Well, the other thing that'll add to that, too, is maybe this is just my own personal bias, and I could also be wrong on this take.
Where's your
opinion.
bias?
But does anybody look this year, or did anybody look at Penn State as like, that's legitimately maybe the best team in the country? Like, have we ever argued that about Penn State? They're a good team. We know they're a good team, but We've all kind of felt that's probably the same team we've seen, and they barely beat USC a couple weeks ago. And
I
they
was
were
surprised they were
with
6.
Like I was
to
too.
be fully honest,
but
with
the
you.
logic that I'm going with here is the quality of the win that you want to give. Like Texas was the number 1 team in the country when Georgia did that to him. There was the thought is Texas that like everybody loved Texas that week. Everybody said Texas might run the table, and this
win the SEC.
This is the dominant team in the sport. They might be the most complete team in college football. And Georgia's defense just obliterated them in that game, and
caused
so
a quarterback controversy.
I know that in terms of overall record, they're both 7-1. And again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Texas isn't that team, and we end up finding out more about them, and they struggle with Florida this week. I don't know how the rest of the season is going to play out, but in my mind, to me, a win at Texas is more impressive than a win at Penn State because of how I feel about those two teams.
We have noted this on the show before they even started the 12-teamer that if they ever expanded to 8 to 10 to 12 to 16, we were always on the side of, talk about being on the right side of history here, that this was not going to stop debates and arguments and anger. And
God, no.
I am not shocked to see that people, and look, it's the first ranking, like, none of this really is that important. It's all going to solve itself out. Penn State at 6 for me. Like, what's Penn State's best win?
USC.
They're sub 500 and
Illinois. They beat Illinois 21-7.
Yeah, at home.
Yeah. Wisconsin, who's 5-4.
And you can certainly point to Miami, though Miami hasn't lost a game yet. The Penn State thing is fascinating to me. I know they're a good team.
How are they ranked ahead of 2 teams from power conferences who are undefeated?
BYU has 2 top 25 wins.
They do. They have 2 wins that are more impressive than anything Penn State has.
Tennessee beat the 11th team in the country,
They
and
did.
I don't think I have my questions on Tennessee. I don't know how we're separating some of these things. Heather Dinich, our good friend of ESPN, was also on the show last night. She talked about, do we expect a 3-loss team to be in a 12-team playoff?
From 2014 to 2023, there has always been at least one 3-loss team in the committee's top 10. Thank you, Stats and Information Group. So you can expect a 3-loss team based on history to be in the committee's top 12.
Who is it more likely to be, Ohio State or Georgia?
Georgia,
They
probably.
really like Ohio State, though, which is interesting.
They love them some Buckeyes, man. They love
Buck
them
nuts
some
over there.
They are buck nuts for the Buckeyes. It's got to come from one of those 2 conferences. It's an obvious statement. It will never come from any others. SEC, though, is always, to me, more likely. Like, I'll use one as an example. You might have a conference champion, first off. Now, that's a little bit different because that's an automatic bid. But like this idea, we're going to get 2 showdown games in the SEC this weekend.
Yeah.
Georgia taking on Ole Miss and LSU taking on Alabama. And we all kind of think, all right, another loss is going to eliminate one of those 2 schools. Just wait. It won't. We're going to try and do this. Alabama or LSU, the loser of that game, especially if it's Alabama close on the road in Baton Rouge, they're going to find a way to keep them in the top 15, and they're just going to be hovering around there. And if they win out 9-3, some of these other teams slip, you get a 2-loss team from the Big 12 or the ACC, Alabama will jump them.
Dinich also talked about the 2nd-place teams in the Big 12 and the ACC.
The 2-loss SEC teams should have the ACC and Big 12's second-best teams very concerned. And as you point out, the Big 12's in a little more precarious position because in the ACC, you have SMU hanging out there at 13. But guess what? That Alabama-LSU game, the loser, they're going to drop down. But the winner, what if LSU wins? They're 15 behind Texas A&M. Where do they go? They go up here ahead of SMU, right? So when you're looking at Alabama 2-loss, A&M 2-loss, they're ahead of Iowa State, K-State, Colorado. That's an issue for those teams. I think it could also be an issue for SMU because I think the winner of that Alabama-LSU game is going to stay on top of them.
Yeah, because why should we credit these Big 12 and ACC schools who may finish with 1 loss when we can give it to 2 or 3-loss SEC or Big 10 teams?
I mean, the response that they'll tell you is, well, go win your conference, Bob. Quit complaining. Go win your conference.
How do you, I guess, this would be a hard question to ask Pate because I don't think Pate's going to have much other than to point to the SEC in the playoff era is like 16-6.
Yeah. They're the best conference in the sport. We all know it.
But also, like, I think it's what's tough for me, and I'm a West Coast college football guy, so I'm in the very vast minority here. They're just allowed to get away with so much more that it makes it so incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Because I don't know.
Everybody plays by different rules.
Like
and that's the
LSU
frustrating
lost
part.
to USC, and you can say, well, it was week 1. Yeah, and
It's not a quality loss in any way, shape, or form.
Alabama lost to an unranked team in Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Is Iowa State able to get away with that and
No.
be ranked in the playoff? Is BYU? It's all so frustrating to me because a lot of people naturally pretend they don't have a bias. That is, well, this is the SEC. It just means more. Yeah. Or also maybe like after 2 or 3 teams, you guys are kind of a mediocre to good conference and you just have a little more talent because you buy it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's frustrating to watch, and it's only going to get worse. And this was I remember a couple of weeks ago, when the thought came out that the SEC and the Big Ten were going to demand more automatic qualifier spots. What were they arguing for? They wanted 4 each or whatever it was. And I just chuckled at that and said, I don't think that's necessary because this is how it's going to work every year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do we think a 2-loss SEC team's not going to get in over a 1-loss ACC team? We all know how this is going to end up.
Yep.
You don't need automatic qualifier spots. The committee is your automatic qualifier. They will always give you the respect. And Heather is 100% correct for LSU or for Ole Miss. If they are both to win this weekend, that is detrimental because Georgia's not going anywhere. There'll be a 2-loss team if they lose on the road to Ole Miss, but they're not falling out of the playoff. Ole Miss will all of a sudden skyrocket from 16 all the way up into the playoff. And the same thing will happen with LSU, despite their early season loss to USC. It doesn't matter to the committee. And so this is the way the playoff will always work. The one silver lining that I have internally, at least, is that there will always be a pathway. We will never have the Florida State situation from a year ago. You win your conference, you're automatically in, at-large bid, good luck. It's not going to be easy, but that pathway will always exist for you. I think the biggest frustration I had of the night, outside of the Georgia-Ohio State stuff not making much sense to me, if you just did blind resumes, which I know that I don't do this in the Dirty Poll, but I'm trying to project to where I think it'll be at the end of the season when we do that segment on Thursdays. Indiana and BYU being undefeated in power conferences and having multiple 1-loss teams ahead of them, some of them who don't have a quality win on the season. Like, I can feel how I want about Texas. What's Texas's best win this year?
It's at Michigan.
Okay. Michigan sucks.
What's Indiana's best win?
That's
their
fine.
Resume, their strength of schedule killed them in this.
It did. You know who it didn't kill last year? Who had the same strength of record and the same strength of schedule? Who won the games by the same margin Indiana is this year? Who was the number 1 team in the country? The Michigan Wolverines. Played nobody in non-conference until they got Penn State and Ohio State in the last 3 weeks of the regular season. They didn't play anybody with a pulse until November.
Yeah, it's the new.
And
it's
they
the new
were
kid
the
on
number
block.
1 team in the country. And it did not. The
Indiana's
only
not
reason
getting a benefit
because they're Indiana, and that
Yes.
look, I can feel how I want. I've had some fun at their expense, and I don't think Indiana's one of the 5 or 6 best teams in the country. I think they're going to lose to Ohio State. That's an opinion based on what they've accomplished. They have shown you in the past they don't hold other schools accountable for that, and the only reason they're ranked 8th as undefeated is because their name is Indiana and not Michigan, Texas, Miami, Georgia, Ohio State, whatever.